Now we're going to get into our preview of the Brewers. They look like they're going to be the Cardinals' top competition in the Central. What do you guys have for us?
The Brewers are very interesting for me because obviously they have that top end starting pitching, and we saw what that can do with a flawed team in the postseason, specifically with the Phillies. Like we know very well as Cardinal fans that if you get a top team with two legitimate aces at the top of the rotation, it doesn't really matter what the rest of that team looks like. They're going to compete in the postseason. It's just a matter of whether or not they can get there. You have Corbin Burns, who wasn't as great as his Cy Young year in 2021, but still showed ace stuff. Yeah. And Brandon Woodruff, I think had some injury issues last year, but definitely also we've seen what he can do. He can also be a number one for most teams. He would be the number one on the Cardinals, that's for sure. But in terms of the rest of that roster, I'm kind of puzzled by that lineup. They shipped away Colton Wong, who is one of my favorite players, by the way, to Seattle. It's great that we don't have to see him in Milwaukee anymore. That was unfortunate for me as a Cardinal fan, but
yeah, it was tough.
They got back Jesse Winker, who's a reclamation project for them. He definitely struggled with Seattle, but I'm not really sure why they made that deal, because the Brewers last year, in terms of offensive production, they hit a lot of home runs, but they didn't really hit for average. And Colton Wong is an average guy. He doesn't hit a lot of home runs. He's a speed defender.
What was Colton Wong's average last year, though? I mean, let's look at Wong's offensive stats. I do think they've slipped a little bit recently. He's getting up there in age. Colton Wong's 32 now. Last year, he batted,
251 with a 339 on base. So his on base numbers are still on par with some of his better years in St. Louis, which is still
sure. But I think Colton Wong has really shifted into a bit of a slugger. He did have his best season yet by OPS plus standards, 118. Mm-hmm. But he did that with a 430 slug. You know, Colton Wong hit you 15 bombs and 24 doubles. I mean, he had over 40 extra base hits last year, and he was only hitting 251. That's the lowest average he's put out since 2018 in St. Louis, which was probably his worst offensive year there. So I don't know. I definitely think Colton Wong is not fitting that philosophy if you're looking for some average guys. And Winker at times has shown that he can hit 300, and he's a former NL Central killer. I personally love the deal for Milwaukee.
Yes, and I believe he's going to be a free agent after the 2023 season anyway. So I feel like they made the best of that and were able to get Jesse Winker in return. And I believe Abraham Del Toro was also.
Yeah, Abraham Del Toro was the other name. He started with the Astros and then was dealt in the Kendall Graveman deal to the Mariners, I think, and then was shipped over. But he hasn't done much. You know, he big name as a prospect, but really has yet to catch on. But if anyone can catch on, they'll catch on with the Brewers.
I mean, you look at this lineup again, Rowdy Tellez, power hitter. That's kind of all that he really does. Christian Yelich, I mean, if he finds it, I'm going to be terrified. When he found it in 18 and 19, the Brewers won the Central, I believe, both times.
They did not win in 2019. They won in 2018.
Okay.
Well, I think that's a big if, though, for Christian Yelich to find his swing again, because Yelich has been either average or below average, I guess, 3 years running now. Because he had that MVP season, then the MVP finish where he almost won it again. But since then, he's been not great. Last year, Yelich was a 111 OPS plus guy. So he was a worse hitter than Wong by that metric. Only a 738 OPS. He's hitting 250 the last couple of years. He just hasn't been great.
And I've heard that he's been plagued by some sort of back issue recently, maybe in the past couple of years, and that has somehow affected his swing.
Yes.
And hopefully, I mean, I personally like Christian Yelich. I hope he finds his prowess again. But in terms of looking at the rest of the lineup, I think that he's probably their best overall hitter still.
Yeah, definitely with the departure of Renfroe, who was to me the scariest name in that lineup last year. I can't believe they let him walk. I think that was a big mistake.
I mean, there have been rumors that Renfroe is not a great clubhouse presence, and he's been shipped like 4 times in the last 4 years, something like that. So
did he start in San Diego?
I believe so. And then he went to Tampa to
Boston, Milwaukee
to Anaheim. Yeah.
Interesting career path. Yeah, he has been traded around.
I think you guys are both forgetting Willy Adames. I know he's a more complete player. in terms of like defensively, like he's a good
Yeah,
defender, but he's also definitely a scary bat in that lineup. I don't like seeing Willie Adames when we face the Brewers, but
it's a great trade with them.
Yeah.
Because who'd they send? I think they sent Fireheisen and another reliever for Adames from the Rays. Although the relievers they sent have been great too. So I don't know, win for everybody there.
Yeah, and when he was traded to the Brewers, I remember, I guess it was 2 years ago now, he really turned it up when he became a Brewer.
Yes.
He hit a lot of home runs in that final stretch going into I think 2021, and even last year he still ended up with like 31 bombs and 98 RBIs. So he's still one of the best power hitters, at least at shortstop position in baseball. So
the huge reason the Brewers have contended. I mean, it was an unbelievable get for them, and he was replacing. I guess Orlando Arcia was there before him. And then after that, it would have been Luis Urias, who just really, hasn't turned into what we thought he would.
I mean, if we're talking about good Brewers trades, I think they fleeced the Braves for William Contreras.
Absolutely.
I don't
100%.
They didn't give anything up for William Contreras. I was shocked. And that's a great young bat. How is he changing teams right now? I understand the Braves got Sean Murphy, but come on, let the guy DH.
Yeah, and also we got ourselves a fun little rivalry in the Central now with Wilson Contreras, who's the better Contreras, by the way. Hopefully,
but, sure. He needs.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think both of them could be all-stars again this year, so it's going to be a lot of fun, and it's great for William Contreras because now he's going to be an everyday catcher again. Mm-hmm. Because they let Narvaez go, if I'm correct. So, I guess William Contreras is going to be the guy there, and he definitely wasn't going to be in Atlanta. So good for him. I'm glad he's going to get to step into that role.
I'm very excited to see the sibling rivalry take place in the field between our two teams. So
yeah, it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to see him. William comes up to bat and Wilson's behind the plate. It's going to be great.
Yeah, I remember when Jose Molina came to St. Louis with the Rays. I think Yachty left like crackers or something for him on the home plate. That was pretty funny.
That's awesome. Yeah, those are so fun. Baseball is so cool like that because I feel like there's a lot of families that play together, and that's just really great. You have the Molinas, you've got the Contrerases. That's really special.
All right, I want to cover the bullpen real quick because the Brewers obviously are missing a key piece of that bullpen that they had last year in Josh Hader, who they shipped to San Diego. I know he didn't necessarily have a great middle half of the season, and I think that's putting it lightly. He was not great, but I think he found it in the postseason, and I think the Brewers are really going to miss him throughout next season. I don't know if Devin Williams can hold it down.
Well, Devin Williams had a good year statistically, but in the big moments, he was not there. If you recall at the end of the season, there were a couple games in a row that Williams really struggled in. And as a Cardinals fan, I was very much enjoying that. But that really cost the Brewers, just a couple more games, they might've been able to slide into that third wildcard spot. So you do have to wonder, how's that going to affect Devin Williams moving forward? They have a couple other interesting names at the back of the pen. Matt Bush is still there, right? And then they've got one name that I can't pronounce at all, so I don't even know if I'm going to try. But, he's a 27. Yeah, 27-year-old lefty, so he's an interesting name as well. But you're right. Missing Josh Hader is going to be absolutely brutal for the Brewers. And he's been such a consistent, dominant presence there the last few years.
Looking at the roster resource page, I see that the Brewers also have Ashby and Hauser as longmen in the bullpen now. They were both starters last year. So that's kind of scary that they have guys there that can go multiple innings and be solid. So I'm a little bit afraid of that, but I don't know. There's a lot of question marks in this Brewers bullpen, I feel like, without Hader, and the depth is going to be tested.
Yes. And so Devin Williams last year, he was pretty angry at the Brewers front office for dealing Josh Hader away. And he himself said he was not ready to be in that closer role just yet. He didn't feel like he was the right guy for that. But towards the end of the season, I think he definitely turned it around and became that lead guy. But I'm looking at the names for their relievers right now, and I mean it's projecting that Matt Bush is going to be their number 2 guy, but he is 37 years old, so
he's really getting up there.
Sure. So I mean their bullpen doesn't look as complete as it was last year with Hader, but I do still think they'll have a good season.
When one of the big gets in that Hader trade was Rogers, right? So it was kind of a closer for closer swap with a little bit more sent in by the Padres to make it even, because Hader's clearly the superior pitcher, but they let him walk. I believe he signed in San Francisco, and now, those twins will be together, more family.
Mhm.
But they let him walk. That's crazy. He was one of the big gets.
I mean, he was not great with the Brewers last year at all. I think he really fell off in Milwaukee even more than he did in San Diego. And I don't know. Personally, I remember Taylor Rogers or Tyler. It was Taylor, right? Taylor Rogers was a guy I was always looking forward to seeing, because during the Pools chase to 700, I was like, oh, if Taylor Rogers comes in, he's a lefty, and Albert's gonna
Absolutely
crush a few off him, and I think he did. So I guess
for sure. But I just think, a former closer like that, someone who's still young, plenty of time to bounce back. I don't know. I think that would have been a great name for them to add to their pen. Could have really rounded out that pitching staff a little bit. And he's a lefty, so you'd love to see more of that depth back there.
And honestly, I mean, it was a little confusing. Another member of that Josh Hader trade was the Nelson Lamet. And as we know, a few days after he was traded to the Brewers, he was DFA'd, and the Rockies picked him up. And of course, we know what happens when he was a Rocky. He gave us a walk-off, I think it was like a three walks and then a hit by pitch for Tyler O'Neill, and we won for a walk-off. I think that was
the Josh Hader trade that just kept on giving.
Yeah, personally, I like to say the Cardinals won the Josh Hader trade, but I think Hader did actually pay off for San Diego in the end. So, they did get some value there.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think I don't really see what the point of that trade was now. It certainly looks like a bit of a sunk cost for the Brewers. I don't know why you're trading a generational reliever like Hader in the first place. But that's just me. But when I look at this team overall, it's pretty obvious most fans feel the same way about the Brewers. They've got a really strong front three, right? Burns, Woodruff, Peralta. And we haven't even mentioned Peralta yet. He had some injury issues last year as well. He's going to be a good pitcher again this year. There's almost no way he's not good. He's been great in the past. And then the bullpen is really shaky after Devin Williams. And then the lineup is shaky all over the place. So you have to wonder, how many games can they win with this pitching staff, but with this offense?
I think it's a little bit more of a Marlins situation again. We've hit on it a couple times this episode, but the teams with good pitching and poorly structured lineups like the Brewers, Marlins, and the Reds don't tend to win a lot of games, because if you don't score, you can't win, right? Like,
it is the name of the game. You do have to outscore the opponent, and I'm not sure the Brewers are going to be able to do that much this year. I think them and the Reds are actually really similar. The Brewers are a little bit better across the board. The Brewers have the developed pitching. The Reds have the developing pitching. The Brewers have a bad lineup. The Reds have a terrible lineup. The Brewers have some bigger names in the bullpen than the Reds, but they both have something to dream on. Maybe they're just another, more evolved state of the Reds, but neither of these teams really strikes a ton of fear into my heart as a Cardinals fan. I don't think the Brewers can win many more than about 85 to 87 games with this lineup. Maybe they'll contend for a wild card spot, but I think the Cardinals will take the division handily.
I also think the Cardinals, in regards to the Brewers, definitely have a leg up on them in terms of lineup. Our pitching is always going to be there. Like, I know we complain about not having that strikeout pitcher, but sure, I don't think any pitcher can truly be that bad with St. Louis, because we do have such a good defense.
Yeah. And we play in a pitcher's park.
So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what the Brewers throw together this season. But I'm not as afraid of them as I was a year ago.
Not at all.
Yeah. And honestly, last year, I think we won the season series with them by one game. I think it was 10-9 for us.
Yeah, really close.
And, I could see us doing better than that this year. But, with the division rivalry, it's always, up in the air as to who will win the series. So we shall see how that turns out.
Yeah, if you want to preview the Cardinals a little bit, I think a lot of the struggles that we had against the Brewers were earlier in the season when Albert's bat hadn't necessarily clicked. And I know Albert was obviously so huge for us in the second half of the season, but in the first half, like we only really had 2 real bats in this lineup. And I think Contreras is going to be a much more consistent presence throughout the lineup throughout the entire season. It's not going to take some like crazy reawakening like Albert had. I think he'll just be consistently good throughout the entire season.
Absolutely. I just think if you look at these teams right now, coming out of last season, there's a 7-game gap, right? The Cardinals win the division by 7 games last year. I think the Brewers got worse. I love the Contreras edition. But I think for them, like the William Contreras edition, I love both Contreras editions. But I love them adding William Contreras, but I do think they got worse. I think shipping out Josh Hader was a big mistake. If anything, they might have stayed the same, but I look at the Cardinals, I think they got better. And so I don't see this gap getting smaller. You know, I don't see them making up 7 games. That's a lot. That is a lot of ground to make up. Yeah. So where do you guys have the Brewers finishing in this division?
I mean, I think I have to have them finishing second. I know we're going to break down the Cubs next week, but I don't think the Cubs have the pitching depth needed to compete with the Brewers in that regard. Absolutely. And the lineup depth for the Cubs, I know they added a few reclamation projects and Bellinger, Mancini, Swanson's a big add for them, but I don't think their lineup is star-studded enough like the Cardinals is to really compete with that pitching.
Not at all. And then circle back just a bit. Where do you have the Reds finishing? It's 4th or 5th. Are they in the basement or are they just out of it?
You know, we're going to touch on this next week with the Pirates, but yeah, I believe in magic. Andrew McCutchen going back to the Pirates. I think he saw what Albert did last season and he's like, you know, I'm kind of at the end of my career. I'd like to finish strong and maybe juice my numbers a little bit. And
so a little bit of Andrew McCutchen, turn back the clock magic, bring the Pirates out of the cellar.
Yeah, I think the Reds will finish in 5th place.
I also have them in 5th. Gravy, where are they for you?
Yeah, honestly, I agree. I think for the Central Division, it'll be the Cardinals, the Brewers, the Cubs. I'm going to say the Pirates are going to pass up the Reds as well. I do believe Andrew McCutchen is going to have a really nice farewell tour with the Pirates this year. I mean, he was just such a beast for them for so long. And he won
that 2013 MVP season. He beat out our own Goldie, although he was with the Diamondbacks at that point.
Yeah.
All right. And then one more thing I wanted to touch on with the Brewers. We just want to cover some names to know. You know, you might not remember Keston Hiura, but he's going to be back this year. He should be healthy. He should be ready to go. And then they've got some fascinating prospects who could be coming up as well. There's Jackson Chourio, who I don't think is going to debut this year. I think he's going to be a next year guy. But then after him, you've got Joey Weimer, you've got Sal Frelick, and you've got Garrett Mitchell, I believe, who are all some stud young outfielders. So the Brewers could really be bolstering that outfield as soon as May if they're looking to call these guys up. Expect Sal Frelick to contend for NL Rookie of the Year. He's a great name to learn. So yeah, the Brewers do have a lot of exciting talent in that farm system coming up, and a lot of it on the offensive side where they need the help. So I do think they have a chance. If these guys come up and pop, I think they could push the Cardinals for the division. I think that's the best way. I think if the Brewers make the playoffs, it's going to be because their young talent came up and really, really hit the ground running. If they don't, it's going to be because either they didn't bring the guys up or the guys didn't perform the way they hoped to.